In 1940, the first video game debuted. In 1972, Pong was released. In 1985, we saw the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System. In 1992, Super Mario Kart was born. And then in 1996, well, that's when the trauma started. For 3 decades, or more if you're watching this in 10 years from now, the fan-dubbed Blue Shell has been destroying friendships, ruining perfect races, obliterating any chance of justice, punishing those that are able to get ahead even if they did nothing wrong, and rewarding those that fall behind even though they kinda stink. Can I just call this a blue shell? I'm sick of saying Spiny just for the sake of being correct for this series. We all know why they chose the Spiny to go last. I don't need to have a discussion on this. It's probably single-handedly the most iconic item in Mario Kart. The blue shell might be more famous than the actual game itself at this point. It has evolved a bit throughout the years, both in its appearance and its actual function. Back on the Nintendo 64, it was a darker shade of blue, but more importantly, at one point it got wings, and then it lost those wings again. Prior to getting those wings, the blue shell would shoot forward along the ground, and it would strike anybody that gets in its way as it aims for its target, which is the first place driver. It also used to make a siren noise as it passed through you, so you'd hear it coming. This was similarly the case in Mario Kart Super Circuit. Once we got to Double Dash, that's when the blue shell started to fly, complete with wings. And it stuck with those wings for a while, but back in Mario Kart 7, the wings were removed, and Mario Kart 8 continued on basically what was in Mario Kart 7. It's made other appearances throughout the franchise, most famously as an item in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Basically doing the same thing, you pick it up and throw it, and it hovers over the first place player and then slams down onto them. The fact of the matter is, the blue shell is basically a cultural icon. It is quite literally a blast, and if you're going to end the game with a blast, you better have the tracks to back it up. The final Grand Prix of the base game got 16 points. The final Grand Prix of the DLC got 16 points. Let's see if the final Grand Prix of the Booster Course Pass, the Spiny Cup, is able to end this game with a blast. The 24th Grand Prix in this game, the Spiny Cup, starts off with Madrid Drive from Mario Kart Tour, Rosalina's Ice World from the Nintendo 3DS, Bowser Castle 3 from the Super Nintendo, and Rainbow Road from the Nintendo Wii. Can we call this one an honorary special cup? The last 2 tracks are Bowser Castle and Rainbow Road after all. Granted, they are retro, so you can't really be a special cup if you're retro, but you get the point. And I don't think it's coincidental at all that they decided to end the game with one of the most famous Bowser Castles and one of the most famous Rainbow Roads. But let's go through Madrid first. So I think the first lap of Madrid starts off a bit slow, but it gets a little bit more exciting as you move along. I like the parts in the big open concrete areas where you have a wiggler walking around. And in general, the twists and turns throughout the routes make for a nice and compelling competitive race. And I'll be honest, by the time this one came out, after seeing how they included a baseball diamond before and an ice rink, I knew they were going to include the Santiago Bernabeu. And my experience might vary from others, but the entire time I was driving through the Madrid track the first time, all I could think was, are they not going to include it? Like, I enjoyed the race, but I was looking for the soccer field. I was unintentionally building hype for myself as I was going through the track. So for me, it was really nice when I got to see the soccer field. Now, I'm not a Madrid fan by any means, but they are basically the most successful club of all time. So it was cool to see the Santiago Bernabeu make it onto the game. The only thing I will say is that this is not the best tour track, but it is a track that I love a lot. It is one that I do go out of my way to play, and it might be because it's so memorable to me because of the Bernabeu. And I have learned to enjoy this track a lot more than many of the other ones, which makes me enjoy it even more. I mean, the footage here was nice and peaceful because I actually know this track as compared to a lot of the other tour tracks which I haven't memorized. That being said, this game can get really boring when you're playing with CPUs. Because I know when I'm on this track and playing with human players, there's a lot more commotion going on and a lot more explosions. Either way, this one gets its 3 points, and it's actually not too difficult of a track either, so for the first track in a Grand Prix, it works. I will caveat that this is a borderline 3-pointer. It could easily have come out to 1 point, but I think that soccer field just slightly bumps it up, and the fact that I go out of my way to play it means it's a track that I love and enjoy a lot more than the other ones in the game. And following Madrid is Rosalina's Ice World. I don't know what the general consensus is here, but I think this is the best ice theme stage in the game. I use the phrase ice strategically because I think there are some snow themed stages that I prefer, primarily Mount Wario and DK Summit even, but I like this one more than Sherbert and some of the other ones that have popped up. Whether it's the half pipe and half a half pipe because it's cracked at some segments, or the moments where you're driving through the ice, the risk and reward of taking the speed bursts right by the cliffs. I just feel like there's a lot of fun to be had on this one, and the more chaotic it gets, the more enjoyable it gets. And I like that the track seemingly makes you think that it's simple, but then as you get through it, it just gets more difficult as you go along, with random icicles or penguins along your path. There's a serene vibe here, and it's kind of funny because this is Rosalina's track, and it kind of feels like Mario Galaxy to an extent. I guess this is the part where I remind you that the Mario Galaxy series is going to start immediately after this one's done. While I'm recording this, I have no idea when, but I'm sure there's an announcement on my channel by now. And I've probably mentioned it in the comments already too. So make sure you go back and watch my Mario 64 stuff, 64DS, and the Mario Sunshine stuff, just so you can get a refresher for how I feel about all these things. But anyway, this is another 3-pointer for me. It's the best ice course in the game, and it was one of my favorite tracks from back on the 3DS. And it's also an uptick in difficulty from the last one. Our third track is Bowser Castle 3. So I basically feel the exact same way about this one as I did the Super Nintendo's Rainbow Road. This is a phenomenal recreation of the Bowser Castle 3. It's pure chaos, it's difficult to get through, the visuals are stunning. I mean, there are only 2 Bowser Castles in this game, one of them is the brand new one from the Special Cup, and this one is representing the retro stuff. But even if you throw in Neo Bowser City and Grumble Volcano, I think this one still stands up amongst them. I'm torn between the Mario Kart 8 version and this one as my favorite. This one actually might be more competitive to race in, but it doesn't have a giant Magma Bowser punching downwards. Honestly, I would have a hard time choosing between this one and the Super Nintendo's Rainbow Road as my favorite SNES track too. But I think regardless of how I spin it, this is clearly going to be a 3-pointer for me, and man, the Spiny Cup just keeps getting better and better. Because you know that these tracks are diverse, and you know that there's a good difficulty curve, and you know what the finale is. This is what a Rainbow Road should play like, should look like, and should feel like. While I think Nintendo 64's Rainbow Road is true to the spirit of Rainbow Road, after all, it did earn its 3 points, I think this one being a longer challenge makes it more enjoyable as a result for me. There's definitely room for both, and I think they're both excellent courses, but this one just hits that spot a little better. And the SNES one, while it is great, similar to how I felt about the Bowser Castle before this, it's really competitive, it's fun to race in, but it just doesn't have that wow factor of some of these more fleshed out non-super courses do. I will admit that I am glad that they didn't include the Double Dash in the DS variants, because at some point things would start to get a little bit too repetitive. For what it's worth, I think the Nintendo 64, Double Dash, Wii, and DS all have great Rainbow Roads in their original games, and that's largely because I feel like they live up to what Rainbow Road is. I feel like Mario Kart 7, they tried to experiment a little bit too much there. It was still fine enough, and which is why I gave it 1 point, but by the time they got to Mario Kart 8, I felt like they completely threw the formula out the window. The formula for Rainbow Road is very simple. It's 2 words. Rainbow Road. You can have a few segments where you're blasting off or you gotta perform a trick or something, but the whole concept of this track is to just have a nice, long, and windy racetrack to get through. Now, obviously, in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you have a lot of those, so maybe it's not as unique anymore, but still, when they released the base game, they needed an actual Rainbow Road, not a space station with a Rainbow Road sticking out of it. That being said, I don't think they could have found a better way to end this Grand Prix. Mario Kart Wii is Mario Kart Wii after all. Prior to Mario Kart 8, it was the most popular Mario Kart. Even till now, they have their own community where they're making new tracks and it's still pretty active. Don't tell Nintendo. It's an obvious 3-pointer for me. And quite frankly, this entire Grand Prix, I can't think of a better one to put the Spiny Cup on. And I understand this has nothing to do with soccer, but even when you consider the tour track, Real Madrid's won like 15 titles, with like 5 or 6 of those being in the last decade. So you take that, mixed with the fact that Madrid is one of the most popular cities in the world to visit, and all of a sudden you probably picked one of the best cities to choose for a Spiny Cup. Rosalina's Ice World is one of the best ice tracks, and one of the nicest tracks on the 3DS in my opinion. I think it was too overlooked on the 3DS, but bringing it into the Booster Course Pass gives it another chance. And I think if you actually compare it to some of the other ice tracks in the map, you'll start to notice how much nicer it looks, and how much more competitive and difficult it can be. So you end up going from a fairly easy enough city track in the daytime to a dark and mysterious nighttime track in Rosalina's Ice World with an uptick in difficulty. But then, after the ice, it takes you straight into the flame world of Bowser's Castle. And it just gets a lot more intense, a lot more competitive, a lot more difficult, a lot more thrilling. For all intents and purposes, Bowser's Castle is the climax of anything Mario related. You can't top it in spectacle, you can't top it in music, you can't top it in difficulty. It's the end of the game. And that is true in almost everything Mario related except for Mario Kart. And that's because in Mario Kart, they have Rainbow Road. It looks like nothing else in the game because there's nothing else in the game like it. Well, I mean, not including the other Rainbow Road tracks. It's harder, more thrilling, more of a test of your skill than anything else. And it's a pleasure to drive through. If there's anything, and I mean anything I can pick at, it's the fact that Rainbow Road kind of has the galaxy vibe and Rosalina's Ice World kind of has the same vibe too. But that would be the nittiest of picks. That's one of those things where if you added on to like 5 or 6 other things, then maybe you would lose a point. But in general, I mean, the Spiny Cup delivers. And man, does it deliver. It's not the only 16-pointer that I've gone through so far. And on my next segment, I'll be running through all of the different 16-pointers, all of the worst tracks in the game, and having a little bit of discussion on some of the data that I've collected all throughout. I was thinking about throwing it here, but I wanted to give it a good amount of attention. But yeah, this isn't the only 16-pointer, but it is still a 16-pointer, easily. And I'm not quite sure how I'm going to determine which 16-pointer is better than the other, but I will say I wouldn't be remotely surprised if this ends up being my favorite Grand Prix in the entire game. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, because that could completely be recency bias. Do I gotta do the tally? Madrid Drive 3 points, Rosalina's Ice World 3 points, Bowser Castle 3 points, Rainbow Road Wii 3 points, Fully Diverse 3 points, Perfect Difficulty Curve 3 points, the final Grand Prix of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the Spiny Cup, the cup that closes off the Booster Course Pass, the cup that ends the legacy of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, earns itself 16 points. In the next segment, we'll look over the data and reach some conclusions.